Good afternoon, collectors and friends. Happy New Year from the doctor. I'm your host, Leighton Sheldon, and this is Trading Card Therapy, episode number 85. Now, if you've missed the other 84 episodes, you can find them on Apple or Spotify or wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts. But if you are like me and you're an avid collector, you might want to see the video component of these podcasts, because we have shown off lots of great cards and memorabilia over the prior 84 episodes. So if you'd like to watch the video component of Trading Card Therapy, you can do that on our Just Collect YouTube channel. Thank you so much, each and every one of you, for tuning in today. Today we have a special guest, Ezra from Mascot. We're going to bring him on in just a couple of minutes. Before we do that, I wanted to show off, this was my homework as I came in today. Someone dropped off a local collection of just over 1,000 1965 Topps baseball cards. And usually when there's that many, you might get a handful of stars, but this is what we would call tier 1 stars here at Just Collect. I've just begun the evaluation. As you can see, they're all still, loose. We'll put these all individually in card savers and we'll apply a grade, and then we'll figure out what we think each of them is worth. We won't go through everything, but you can see here there are several mantles. This is someone who collected them back in the day, several Carlton rookies, and just a really fun collection from the 1960s to start our year off here at Just Collect. If you have a collection yourself like this, or it's bigger from the 50s or from several different decades, you can always email me directly, leighton@justcollect.com, or you can fill out our free appraisal form on our website at justcollect.com. Here's a slew of Pete Roses, kind of do it like that. I think there's a bunch of Catfish Hunter rookies, and then there we go. So you got 4 mazes. Interesting to note how there's like a little bit of a different color between those. It's interesting. Bobby Euchre's a high number, and then I think there's a bunch of Ernie Banks. Yeah. So anyway, that's a fun collection. Looks like there's a bunch of Tony Perez rookies. Wow, like 7 or 8. Well, stay tuned. We'll let you know if we get this collection. All right, we're going to bring on Ezra Levine from Mascot. How are you today, Ezra?
I'm good. Happy and healthy New Year to you. Always a pleasure being with you.
Well, thanks so much for joining us here on Trading Card Therapy. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Always a pleasure to talk to you in general, not just in podcast form.
Absolutely. I think this might be our first formal podcast together, but we've seen each other like things like the Mint Collective and certainly many card shows, including the National. And it's always fun to run into you. Ezra, have you been getting any sleep these days? I know you now have a couple kids on the team, so to speak, in the family. How are things going at home? You guys getting sleep?
Yeah, our house, I wouldn't describe our household as quiet and subdued at the moment. We have 3 young kids. Our oldest is 5. He's a diehard sports fan. I'm trying to get him into the collecting gene. He's slowly learning. Then we have a 3-year-old, and then we just had a baby girl about a year ago. So she just turned 1 a couple weeks ago. I'm sure a lot of people have their own children and have gone through similar experiences, especially when they're all young. So sleep is at a premium. We're also trying to build a great business here at Mascot and try to provide a really valuable service to the hobby. So sleep is at a premium, but it's great. It's a lot of fun, and both parenting and building a business is definitely a labor of love as well.
It's a good way to put it, but yes, I agree with you. Like I said, I appreciate you joining us today. So we're going to get into Mascot in just a few minutes, Ezra. But before we do, for those that maybe don't know you as well as I know you, if you could paint a little bit of a picture and give a background as to kind of your journey when you started collecting, and maybe a little bit about collectible, if you're comfortable with that, and everything that led you to Mascot as it is today.
Sure. My collecting journey probably is pretty similar to a lot. I've been, collecting has always been a huge part of my life. I give all the credit in the world to my dad, who still to this day is a very active collector. In fact, we're recently on the Hobby Mensches podcast. If you haven't heard that, also fun. And they wanted to have my dad and I both on together to kind of share both his experience, how he got involved in collecting, and then ultimately how he passed it along to me and, some of his hobby background. My dad, a lot of people may know him. He was a rabbi, still is a rabbi. And so a lot of people know him as Rabbi Levine in the hobby. He collects everything from vintage sports cards to ticket stubs to Type 1 photos to sealed packs and boxes to game-worn memorabilia. He's collected it all. And I remember when he was, a younger rabbi, my mother always was a little bit paranoid about, people in his congregation, in his shul, knowing that he collected. So he went by a pseudonym back in, the old message boards. His pseudonym was Reuven. And so people used to call my household when I was a kid asking for Reuven. And I was like, I don't think Reuven lives here. But, long story short, my dad's been a big collector. Collecting was always a big part of my relationship with my dad. I remember going to the National when I was probably 7 or 8 years old, going to probably the Philly show, even before I even knew it was the Philly show. We'd take, car trips there. And when I went to summer camp, he would always instead of sending food, he would always send boxes of cards. And my brother and I would set up little mock hobby shops in our bedroom where we'd sell the cards that my dad purchased for us back to my parents. It was a great business model. So long story short, collecting has been, in my blood and my background forever. I went to school, I went to college, lost a little bit of touch with the hobby as is a fairly normal story, and was working in finance and had other entrepreneurial pursuits. After I decided to, leave what I was currently doing or what I was doing back then, my dad said, "Hey, look, you've been collecting for a long time. We collect together. You should really look to, be an entrepreneur within the collectible space." He thought it was a ripe for some technology and a little bit of innovation. This was probably 2018, 2019, call it. And so that's when I started to, kind of look at other opportunities, and fractional ownership at the time was a big trend in the industry, so I wound up starting a company called Collectible, which was a fractional ownership company that was specifically tied to sports. There had been a lot of other fractional ownership companies and high-end art and other spaces, but none that dealt specifically with sports. So, we had a lot of success there for a period of time when the market was really strong. We took some amazing items public, including the Baltimore News Ruth, the 53 Topps Mickey Mantle, and a 10. And the list could go on and on. Will Chamberlain's, high school game-worn full jersey, Will Chamberlain's rookie jersey. So we dealt with some of the most iconic artifacts that this market has to offer. And then I wound up leaving Collectible for a whole host of reasons, primarily, just due to regulatory challenges. And I wound up joining up with a company called Slabfolio at the time. And we've since made it into Mascot and really built it up a lot of the last year and a half ago. Mascot, the mission of Mascot is really to provide sellers with unbelievable tools, right? So, Leighton, you were one of the earliest adopters, and I'll never forget that. I remember we were on the Jeremy Lee podcast, and you were doing your segment there, and I started to describe to you what Mascot was. And although you did have a little skepticism, you wound up trying it and really enjoying it, and you guys still use it to this day, which I'm really grateful for your support. But Mascot is really two things. One, it's a really terrific inventory management software. Everyone in this industry has inventory, and a lot of people are looking to move inventory, sell inventory, whether a small bit of it or all of it. And so Mascot also provides really great ways to list and sell inventory across multiple platforms. We work directly with eBay, Whatnot, TikTok, My Card Post, Shopify, Square, and there's going to be a slew of announcements coming out about other marketplace partnerships as well. So that's a little bit about my background. I know I've been rambling for a little bit, but I did want to give some context as to my background and how steeped it is in in the collecting gene.
Well, I appreciate that you did that, Ezra, for our audience, because even though you and I have got to know each other fairly well over recent years, this is the opportunity for those that have never met you to really learn about your journey. And then, of course, we are going to get into quite a bit about Mascot in the next little bit. Before we get into Mascot, I respect your entrepreneurial spirit and your journey. So was there a light bulb moment when you were at Collectible and you thought about this whole new premise of Mascot, or was it Slabfolio and someone else was running it and they had some ideas, but you had some ideas, and maybe your dad had some ideas because he's an avid collector. So I'm curious, how that kind of came to be before we dive into the details of today, looking at Mascot the way it is currently. Yeah,
sure. With Collectible, so I would say there were two primary reasons for my pivot over to Mascot. One was, anyone who's dealt with any kind of regulated company before, knows exactly what I'm talking about. We were subject to filing all these registrations and everything with the SEC. The SEC is a government body, an agency that is there to regulate investment opportunities. Everything we did was heavily tied to the SEC because they never really dealt in the space of collectibles before, and the theme of collectibles becoming kind of an investable asset class, if you will, was so new. We were just subject to a tremendous amount of regulations, which made just operating our day-to-day basis difficult. So that was reason number one. Reason number two, and I would say this is more of the reason why I decided to pursue Mascot instead of collectible. When you're dealing with these iconic, one-of-a-kind items, it's such a small piece of the industry, right? So, Leighton, you're showing some of those 1965 Topps cards, for instance, right? Those are amazing, amazing artifacts. Those are not, 6-7 figure items. Those are, really, really terrific items, but they're not 6 or 7 figure items. So we were dealing exclusively in 6, 7, even 8 figure items at the time. And the pool of that is, only really applies, at least, from the seller perspective, to a select handful of sellers. Obviously, that pool of sellers is broadening, but I wanted to do something that was applicable to as many people in the industry as possible, whether hobby shops, dealers, just collectors, individual sellers. And so I thought Mascot had a lot more kind of widespread appeal and was a lot more relevant to many more collectors in the space than just the fractionalization of ultra high-end assets.
Listen, I really appreciate the in-depth explanation. And so now that we can kind of dive right into Mascot as it currently stands, I'd love to talk to you. It's funny, I talked to John, J5, as you affectionately known him, about some of our questions. He's like, oh, you think we could put Ezra on the spot on the show? I said, well, we're not going to do that to Ezra like that. But I'm curious because you had mentioned kind of different pools of people. So beyond dealers, which, I'm one of, I'm also a collector, but I don't use Mascot from the collector standpoint. So I think, Ezra, most of the people that are going to be listening to this episode of Trading Card Therapy, if I had to guess, most of them are going to be on the collector side, not the dealer side. So maybe if we could start off talking about some of the different features that are available to collectors, and if there is a cost, just very briefly, it's free or it's nominal, whatever the case is, because that's really, Ezra, you're a swell guy, but I wanted to have you on today because we both love the hobby very much, and we want to continue to bring it incredible value. And so even though I'm heavily immersed in Mascot, I think that there's still a lot of runway left for Mascot to go. And so if I could do just a little part by bringing some additional information, even if they're just collectors, like from my Vintage Breaks community or some from my Just Collect community or my neighbor, whatever the case may be, if we can help out a few more collectors, I'd love to do that.
For sure. Yeah, it's funny. So we started Mascot with the mission of being a tool that can be used by all types of hobby participants. And there's a lot of different participants. You can segment people in a lot of different ways. On the seller side, we tend to bucket them into probably 5 or 6 different categories, right? So you got, the individual collector, a lot of people who collect, they do some degree of selling. They're not a professional seller, but everyone, including my father, is a good example of this. He's a true collector, but at some point, he sells and then he buys something else, or his interest wanes in one item and he gets something else. So you have the collector, then you have the more professional dealer, right? So you'd fall into that bucket, Leighton. And then you have hobby shop owners or people who do this, with a brick and mortar or maybe even just a digital presence. Oftentimes both have brick and mortar and a digital presence. Then you have, kind of this new age of seller, which would be kind of the breaker and the repacker. And then you have a new segment, which we're calling the wholesaler, which is typically people who don't necessarily sell on a traditional marketplace, but they'll do a lot of buying at a show and then they'll sell it to someone else who ultimately resells it. So we call that a wholesaler. So those are our typical buckets of people who Mascot, kind of works with, and we've built tools to support. So if you fall into one of those buckets, we have tools on Mascot to support you. Talking specifically about the collector segment, I think a lot of people think of Mascot as a sort of an enterprise seller's tool. In a lot of ways, we have amazing sellers for that. We still have a lot of great tools for just the average collector. So let me break down a couple of those tools. One, I said at the top of the show, Mascot's 2 things. It's inventory management and the ability to sell across different platforms. So if you're someone who has a great collection and you want a really great way just to see it, understand what you own, perhaps you're a set collector. We have a lot of set collectors who use Mascot, who can put items into different sets. There's a feature called custom tags on Mascot. So we have some of the biggest set collectors who use Mascot to really just kind of segment their inventory or their collection into different sets, so that they know exactly which cards they might be missing, or maybe which cards they need to upgrade, or maybe which cards they have duplicates of if they're buying big collections. So we have a really great tool where people can just understand what they own there. We've also integrated a lot of different pricing sources. So we have partnerships with 130 Point and Card Hedge, where their comping tools are directly integrated in Mascot. So sometimes people don't think of collectors as thinking about the financial value of items, but oftentimes people do have a curiosity about that, as we all know. And so you'd be able to quickly look up the price of your collection or items within your collection directly on Mascot. If people have graded materials, right? So if they have items that are graded by PSA, Beckett, SGC, CGC, Tag, even Mike Baker, PSA DNA, you name it. We've integrated all of their cert databases, so their entire database of what they know about particular items with a cert number. All of those databases are directly intertwined to Mascot, so you can just put a cert number into Mascot and you get all the information, including the population reports, pop counts, directly in Mascot as well. So you can really see that. There's probably so many other features that I'm missing. But of course, if you ever do decide to sell maybe a select portion of your items, if you want to sell it on all these reputable channels, you can do that very easily through Mascot. We're also, without saying too much, but I'll give you a little bit of a teaser, we are actively building something that I think will be a tremendous collector's tool if you're someone who is looking for things that are specific to your collection, but perhaps find the environment a little too fragmented, too many auction houses, too many marketplaces, don't know where to look. Mascot is going to have some really awesome features for you pretty soon.
Well, I'm excited to hear that part of it, Ezra, because I find myself, if I pop in front of my laptop, because I generally do most of the searching, I find the phone to be a little bit too small to do that. It is really difficult to figure out, like, all right, if I want to know what's the auction schedule on the horizon, I go to auctionreport.com. But if I'm looking for a Jackie Robinson piece, oh my God, Ezra, I go to eBay, I go to Heritage. I'm like, you know what? Does REA have an upcoming auction? I Google it because I'm like, maybe there's just something in Google that didn't get picked up. And so I think I hear what you're saying between the lines there, and I'm cautiously very optimistic and excited.
You are thinking correctly. Again, I'm not going to say too much, but it's a bit of I always like to try to go on these podcasts and break a little bit of news. So I gave you, Leighton, the first morsel of news flow on that particular build app, but it's something that I think will be a really great collector. So also in that vein, I should add in two other features that we have. One is if you purchase anything on eBay, Mascot has a direct tool with eBay where the purchase of your items will automatically flow into your Mascot account. So you know exactly what you paid for it, when you bought it, who you bought it from, any images, titling, all that stuff will come directly into your Mascot account, really just automating your quote unquote inventory management, if you will. And then we've also done a bunch with trade shows. So you've been at the Philly show quite a bit. You've been at other shows we've been at as well. Mascot has various partnerships with different trade shows where if you're a collector looking for items in particular, Mascot will essentially aggregate all the dealer inventory. The dealers will put their items into Mascot. And if you're at the show or just curious what inventory is available at the show, you'd be able to go on Mascot and say, hey, I'm looking for XYZ item at the Philly show. Which dealer has it? If any dealer has it, and which table are they located? And how do I find these dealers? So we've done a lot. We've leaned in quite a bit to the collector segment. And, one of our goals in 2025 is to lean in more, certainly.
Love what we're talking about here. Since we're on the subject of innovation, I figured this is a great time to ask. Certainly, Mascot is innovating in a lot of different areas. Where do you think innovation right now in the hobby is strong? And where do you think innovation in the hobby is currently lacking?
Yeah, it's a great question. I remember, when I decided to essentially leave the world of finance, and I actually was in the world of sports entrepreneurship, more traditional sports entrepreneurship, and I decided to kind of join the collectibles realm professionally. This was cut to maybe 5-6 years ago. I remember when I told people that I'm going to be working in collectibles, they almost looked at me like I had 3 heads. It just wasn't sexy, for lack of a better term. It wasn't something that,
Yeah, of course.
so now when you tell people, you work in the field of collectibles, I think that there's been so much innovation and so much investment in this category over the last 5 years relative to where it had been before, that, the industry has seen, a real kind of rise in like the outward respectability and excitement to it. And I think with that, it's brought a lot of human capital, a lot of really talented entrepreneurs, and a lot of people from other industries have come into this category and are really trying to, think about how to grow it, how to innovate within it. So from that standpoint, I think we're a hell of a lot more innovative as an industry than we were maybe 5-6 years ago. I still think we've got a long way to go. And I think over the next, couple of years, there's going to be a lot of great trends that continue to play out. To address your question more directly, where do I think we're strong? I mean, I think we're getting a lot better when it comes to tools like Mascot. Not to sing our praises, right? But having just the basic ability to keep track of inventory, to know what your inventory is worth, to get data on the inventory in a centralized, aggregated place, and then be able to list it effectively and easily across different platforms, making sure that the sellers have as much eyeballs on their items as possible. That's come a tremendous way. I think the ability to understand data in general, right? So, great tools like Card Ladder, for instance, 130 Point, and there's all these other pricing tools, just understanding what items are worth and just being able to track those items over time, I think has come a long way. I think, the grading companies, I'll give them credit. I think PSA has done a really great job of kind of streamlining their data as well. I'll give a shout out to, other news providers, right? So we've had over the last year, LCT come in, who's really providing, high quality professional journalism to keep people just aware of, of different movements and, kind of big things happening in the industry. I think that was something that, even back at Collectible, we were starting to do, which has come a long way. I think we've seen innovation on the trade show side, both in terms of Mascot, with an inventory discovery at shows, but also in terms of big shows like Fanatics and plenty of others who are doing great jobs of bringing in, new audiences into the category. I think in terms of, the new products, I think, Topps has done a really good job of, kind of creating excitement around things like the MLB debut patches. I think are a really great way to engage audiences. So there's been a tremendous amount of innovation. I still think, that the barriers of entry in this category are very high. I think people who've been collecting for a long time understand this industry, understand how it works, understand the differences between grades and, grading companies, and understand the differences between certain cards and other cards. But, I think if you're someone who's just a sports fan, we'll call it just a sports fan who's looking to, find a way to sort of express their fandom, and you say, hey, I want to buy a Derek Jeter card. There's a million Derek Jeter cards to pick from, and there's a million different price points you could choose and variations, and that's very hard. It's very you've been, Leighton, a tremendous leader in this category of like educating people on cards and differences between them, and you've been a trusted voice in this hobby for a long time, which is why you have a great reputation. We need a lot more people like Leighton Sheldon, and I mean this seriously, out there who are just trusted voices who are educating new entrants into the hobby. And that has to come either from people within the hobby continuing to step up and fill that role, or it has to come from sort of a simplified collecting experience, and probably a combination of the two.
Yeah, I mean, a lot wrapped up in there, Ezra, and I certainly appreciate, the praises. I think that you're right at a macro level that we're just getting started with the education. And if you think about it, it's interesting, almost every other major field literally has almost like a not-for-profit component of that niche, of that business, that line of business, to educate people so they understand. And in our business, I don't know if it's because we're largely unregulated, I'm not sure, but there's no one popping up to me. And there's a lot of wonderful social media personalities, but I don't consider someone, just because they're a social media personality, to be an educator. And so I think that the space could certainly use more of that. But I do really love the fact that, and I don't know if I'm wrong in saying this, but I feel like when I first heard about Mascot, I was very excited, but I didn't know if it was for everyone. And as we're sitting here and we're having a great conversation heading into 2025, it's very obvious to me that you and your team at Mascot recognize that the industry is only as strong as each and every person who is enabled to operate within it. And so I'm excited to hear about all the different tools being available to maybe someone who is just using Mascot to simply fund their collection, Ezra, or keep track of their collection in that case, like the set collectors you were mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you're building a business, you sort of have to pick a lane to start, and then as you go, other opportunities present themselves. That's been true of just about everything we've done at Mascot so far. You have a vision, you go to execute the vision, you kind of get it out to the masses, and then when you get it to the masses, you get real-time feedback in terms of what people need, what's lacking, what they would like, and a lot of what we've done over the last year is really just kind of working with great people who believe in the product and are using the product, who tell us, hey, it'd be great if you had this. It'd be great if you had this. We developed the whole hobby shop tool probably back in February or March of last year. And now we have about 300, 350 of the top direct hobby shops using Mascot to do inventory management and to list and to power their own website, et cetera, et cetera. We've done the same thing with the repacking and the breaking space. I know you guys are starting to get really active. They have been active, of course, but we're looking to a few other channels and to expand that business. We devoted a couple months to really building out specific tools for breakers and repackers. We've heard a lot from collectors as well, saying, "Hey, you've got amazing tools for professional sellers. Your tools for collectors haven't been developed yet. When is that coming?" And so, that's definitely a core priority of ours over the next couple of months, is really just to make sure that Mascot is not just for the enterprise seller. Mascot is also for really any type of market participant, whether you're a collector, whether you're a dealer, whether you're a hobby shop, and that presents challenges in and of itself. It's hard to be everything to all people, but we definitely want to have tools that people can use to just to simplify the industry, to reduce some of the natural frictions that come with the space.
Yeah, I think you guys are doing a great job of decreasing friction, increasing liquidity, but not just, for dealers, for everyone, that's out there. And I think that's fantastic. I'm curious, unless I missed it, where do you think our hobby could do a little bit of a better job innovating in 2025? And I'll preface that with, I had a note about data, which we'll talk about, after your answer here. I think we're doing a wonderful job of embracing data, but I always think that there's so much data out there, it might be tough to figure out all the different uses for it. And I think over time, we're going to see, other things play out.
Yeah. I mean, I think, the word I would use to describe the industry for new entrants is it's complicated, right? It really is complicated to, learn what you need to learn to feel comfortable, spending good hard-earned money in this category. And again, a lot of people, can find a mentor, they can look to certain resources, but it's still complicated. So what we've always tried to do is kind of take what's complicated and simplify it in one kind of cohesive package for people. And I really love to see, more consolidation, more aggregation of a lot of the fragmented tools that are available to people in this industry and put it into one place, kind of one go-to shop. Everything from pricing data to item specific data to pop reports to the ability to list on different channels, to be able to find and discover inventory that's available on all these different sites, auction houses, marketplaces, you name it. And I think just kind of continuing to kind of simplify the journey for new entrants and make it something that's easily approachable, I think would be a big win. Obviously, there's so much more that could be said about this, but I think for now, what Mascot's focus is just, hey, let's consolidate, let's aggregate, let's centralize all these tools that are available to different people, and let's try to put it into one pretty neat package so that people can have. And again, utilizing different partnerships across different areas, whether it's marketplace partnerships, whether it's data partnerships, whether it's pricing partnerships, whether it's grading partnerships, but just put it in one, centralized place so that, it can be, a much more streamlined journey for people.
Totally agree. I wanted to give a shout out because I had a note here. We were talking about data and, innovation that's going to be good for the hobby. And sometimes innovation, you got to go to the programmers, right? You got to go right to the team of programmers and you got your fingers crossed that it's going to work. But then other times you're like, oh my God, you have this moment of like the light bulb goes off. So I'm listening to, I think it was Neo, Cards and Comics, interview Nat Turner, within the last 60 days, maybe 30 days or so. And it's a fairly long interview. But if you haven't listened to it, I think it's worthwhile. You can check out his YouTube channel at Neo Cards and Comics. And at one point, Nat got into, because you can tell Nat is such a collector, but I believe that's why there's a fantastic rate of innovation coming from PSA, because he can actually institute, what he sees as potentially an opportunity. So I'm bringing it up because I think it's super cool, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on it. And I'm hoping that there's going to be like other little nuggets coming out of Mascot because of all the data. So I'm hearing Nat talk about data. And he gets into, he's like, we had these problems with COVID, all these cards coming in. And once they finally got a hold of everything, they started to become a little bit more pragmatic and systematic about everything. So he realized at some point, he's like, oh my God, not just for my own collection, but some of the most exciting things that are happening at PSA are literally happening in receiving every single day. And the way he describes it is it's a new card show every day. So they're talking about at PSA, or at least this was Nat on the podcast talking about, hey, as these cards get logged in the system, if you're maybe registered as you have a certain PMG where you're looking for a turkey red with a certain back, right? If it hits the grading system, they're thinking that, well, they'd like collectors to know that. And then, of course, if you're the submitter of that, even if you're a collector, it might be great for the liquidity of your item to get the best possible price. And so I just think when I heard that, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. But beyond that, I think that there's going to be other types of ways to leverage data, whether it be it's you folks at Mascot, Ezra, whether it be it's PSA, or whether it be it's, some of the data mining that's going out there like Card Ladder does or VCP does for prices. I think we're in for some exciting innovation. We just don't know when it's going to come down the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing. Well, first of all, I did hear that interview as well, and I thought it was actually really, really insightful. It's certainly worth a listen for people who haven't heard it. Yeah, I think the big issue that a lot of people have been trying to solve. I don't always like to use this word because it's a little too financial, but the big issue is liquidity, right? And that comes with speed, right? So often we hear this all the time from a lot of people. Hey, I have an item, I know I have to get it graded. Then I send it in. It takes weeks and weeks and weeks, maybe months and months. It's gotten better as of late, but it can take a long time. And then I get it back, and then I got to sell it, and then I got to ship it, and it's a long, frictionful process, right? And oftentimes, the people who may want the end item, who's the end collector, is not even aware that the item is being sold in the first place, right? And so they don't get the item, or perhaps for the seller it doesn't sell for what it might if that person knew it was available. So I think that, in my opinion, is the core issue that's trying to be solved, is a streamlining of the entire process of the entire journey, right? So what PSA is doing, I think, is really smart, right? If oftentimes, and I've seen some really great data on this, but between 60 to 70% of cards that get submitted for grading, I should say, are graded with the intent to resell the item, right? And so if you can, if you're PSA, if you can, essentially facilitate that entire, process from intake, ingestion, data capture, grading, reselling, all in one streamlined journey, without the card having to be shipped multiple times to different people, without having this kind of latency of of the experience, that to me makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think Mascot could do something similar, not with items that are fresh off the grading room, but items that are already in circulation within the hands of dealers or hobby shops or repackers, you name it, wholesalers. And so I think you're going to see a lot of these tools that come that really create additional liquidity, that make it easier for people who want to collect certain items or to get their hands on certain inventory to find the items, and just things that just speed up the entire process. So again, I think that's going to be a big theme over the next 12 months, and probably it's not going to stop there. I think it's going to continue to be a theme over the next couple of years of just, hey, it can be a time-consuming, clunky process to go through all the different rungs that items go through to ultimately end up in the hands of the end collector. How can we streamline this into a more, kind of easier and faster and cheaper journey for everyone involved.
Yeah, I think that's where we're headed. We'll see what kind of progress we make over the next 12 months. I think that it'll probably take longer than that because it's going to be always evolving. But speaking of, let's say, a 5-year horizon, where do you see Mascot in 5 years? Tell me a couple things that you think might be under the purview of Mascot in 5 years, but isn't necessarily something that you handle today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a similar mission that we started out with, right? How can we streamline? How can we make the best possible tool for all market participants within the realm of collectibles? So we have so much more to do. We've really just gotten started. For perspective, we launched Mascot at the National actually in July of 2023. So we've only been out there for give or take a year and a half, 2 years at this point. There's so much more. You should see our product roadmap. It is scarily long, but exciting, really exciting. There's so much more that we want to do. There's so many more partnerships that we need to integrate and want to integrate. There's so many other, sales channels we want to bring on. There's so many of the tools that we want to create for collectors. There's so many other, of great companies and entrepreneurs who are thinking very similarly that I think are very like-minded that we could, kind of help bring along and support through Mascot. So without saying too much on that, I would look for a continuation, but I would say an acceleration of what Mascot's begun, and to really continue to just provide the best service we can. And by providing the best service we can, I believe Mascot is very well positioned to really help grow the industry, really by simplifying, all the various different components of it.
Well, keep up the great work with Mascot. I'm excited to see and participate in your journey and see how it can help both my business Just Collect as well as my individual collecting journey. I have a few other questions if you have the time, Ezra, I'd like to ask.
Of course.
First is, you got a dream location for the National. It's got to be in the continental US. Give me 2 picks for, and let's not say Chicago or Cleveland. It's got to be somewhere it hasn't been held or hasn't been held in a long time at that location.
All right, I'll give a very selfish answer first. I'm based in New York. I have 3 young kids, so selfishly, I'd love to be somewhere where I can travel easily. So I would say, I loved the Fanatics Fest did in New York, right at the Javits Center. It's an incredibly expensive venue, but I think the Javits Center was a terrific venue. Really, obviously they have the space for it, and it's it's a high class facility. Wi-Fi was pretty strong, so you're not going to run into those issues. And very selfishly, it's quite an easy commute for me to be at the Javits Center. So I'm going to go selfish late in my first answer. I'm going to say I want to see the National and Fanatics Fest together, perhaps at the Javits Center in the years ahead.
I think that would be amazing. The Javits Center is perfect for it. Selfishly, even though I don't have 3, I have 1, and it means that my son would actually be at the National.
Yes.
So I would love to see that. How about a second option that's not as selfish?
Yeah. Second option, not as selfish. Second option, not as selfish. Look, I don't mind Chicago. I don't mind Chicago as a venue, easy to get to. Wi-Fi was pretty good. Those are typically the 2 things that I care about the most. I know traffic is a debacle, but if you can come a little bit earlier or leave a little bit later, it's not as bad. So I'm okay with Chicago. If it's always in Chicago, it's not the worst option in the world for me. I've heard people talking about Atlanta as a decent option. Florida, I've heard, is a decent option, although Florida in the summer sounds not ideal at all. Atlanta, I'm sure similar in the summer too. I know you've got a whole clamoring for West Coast. Some people want Vegas. We've thrown conferences in Vegas. Mint Collective is one of them. What I can say about Vegas, well, one, I don't think you want to be in Vegas in the summer either. It's not ideal. So everyone's going to be indoors the entire time, and there's a lot of distractions in Vegas, as we all know. So
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, no, never, of course. So I would rule out Vegas personally. West Coast, you have a lot of good West Coast shows now. I'll give Rob and his team credit for what was formerly known as the Burbank Card Show. Now it's called the West Coast Card Show. But there's plenty of other shows that have sprung up. In Vegas and now in Pasadena and other places. You've got the Front Row Card Show. So over the last couple of years, you've seen a lot of innovation, a lot of new shows popping up the West Coast that may have scratched that itch if you want to speak. So I would say I would be very happy with New York. I'd be very happy with Chicago. I think that as long as we don't outgrow that facility, outgrow that venue, It's a little bit fragmented, but it's big enough. It's centralized. It's close to the airport. Wi-Fi strong. And I have a feeling Joe and his team are going to be working the AC this year.
Yeah, no, I think so too. Well, I appreciate the answers there. Switching gears for a minute, I know this is kind of something that I learned from you at Mascot. I would love if you could share with our audience, maybe it can help dealers and collectors. Do you have a tip or a trick for eBay? And what I'm referring to, for example, is, and I can't definitively tell you this works, but I believe it does, that even if you're on Mascot, well, yeah. I believe we're going to take all of our items down in the month of January and we're going to relaunch. And I suspect with the eBay algorithms working the way they do, we're going to sell some cards that might have been idle on there because the eBay algorithm isn't perfect. Yeah. Could you maybe elaborate on that or share your own tip or trick for eBay users that you've learned through Mascot?
Yeah, we get asked this question quite a bit. And a lot of times people will come to Mascot and say, hey, you know, I've either predominantly or exclusively been selling on eBay. For some reason, I'm not selling as much on eBay as I was before. How come, right? And so, you know, oftentimes, and we built tools that can really facilitate this and make it a lot easier for people to do this, which is why a lot of people, you know, still who come to Mascot, maybe they only still exclusively sell on eBay, but, you know, they use Mascot to help streamline the process. Yeah, I would say it really comes down to understanding eBay's algorithm. And I know when we say algorithm, a lot of people just kind of shut off because it sounds too technology and too sophisticated, and people don't really know what that means. So I'll try to simplify.
If you said that to my mother, she'd start sweating.
Yeah, when I say it to my parents that, hey, we're building a technology business, they immediately go glazed eyes and just shut off. But no, so how eBay works, right? And again, it's much more complicated than what I'm going to make it sound, but I'm going to try to kind of just flesh out what's really important. So eBay works on two things. One is frequency of listings, and the other is recency of listings, right? So what that means is eBay accounts that put up new inventory often and don't have a lot of stale, older inventory just languishing in their account that hasn't been sold is really the secret sauce of eBay. So if you have items on eBay and you haven't added anything new in a long time, or you have items that have been sitting ideally for less than 30 days. But if you have items that have been up there, say for 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years, and they haven't sold and they're still just sitting there, I would delist those and then relist them. You can do this very easily through Mascot. You can use Mascot to connect your eBay account, import your items, and then do it all in bulk, where you essentially bulk delist, bulk relist. Just doing that, right? So just focusing on, hey, I need as many listings as I can, or putting up new listings frequently. And by the way, they don't have to be unique items. They can be, you know, items that have been taken off and then re-put back on as number one. And then if you have items that have been sitting for a long time, just if you remove them and then relist them, that alone should see some tangible results.
And I can speak firsthand. It's definitely worked for me. But I'm going to press you a little bit here. Now I want to know, do you have a top secret tip that you haven't revealed anywhere else, but that you're comfortable to share with our audience that you can think of off the top of your head for eBay in regards to eBay and the
eBay? That was a pretty good tip that I gave you, right? Just, you know, really maximizing the eBay algorithms, right? So frequency and recency of listings, keeping your items fresh, ideally adding new listings every couple of days is, I mean, obviously, you know, on eBay, you know, being a good seller is incredibly important. Right. So when you ship items quickly, when you price items fairly, when you treat people with respect, when you have positive feedback, you know, all that works really well. eBay is obviously really prioritizing eBay Live. So if you're someone who feels comfortable in front of a camera, you know, dabbling there in other marketplaces as well is definitely something that is being prioritized. A lot of these algorithms are starting to prioritize kind of video or live commerce as well, in addition to just you know, kind of your traditional fixed price format. So if you're comfortable going live, you know, I would start dabbling, whether on eBay or other channels as well. You know, see how you can, you know, kind of develop your following a little bit through the live commerce as well.
Just to add to that, so you know, I'm co-owner of a breaking company, Vintage Breaks, and you know, what started off originally as a breaking journey, I now understand it's really a live selling revolution that I'm part of, and that we're all part of, because it's happening big time overseas. And to be fair, back when I was a kid, I mean, my mom was glued to QVC. It was insane. So I don't know if it's going to be like that again. But nonetheless, I appreciate, the insight there. Just a couple more questions for you. Number one, what comes to mind when I say to you, Ezra, what was your favorite hobby moment of 2024?
Oh man, there were a lot. Well, I mean, for one, in my position, I do get to go to a lot of card shows, which I genuinely enjoy. I went everywhere from from the West Coast to the Burbank show, to the Dallas card show multiple times, to the Philly show multiple times, to the National, to Fanatics Fest, to I've probably been to 12 to 20 shows this year. Even more local ones as well. So there's not necessarily one moment, although I'll think about this question later. If you gave me these answers in advance of the call, I would have had a much better answer for you on the spot.
But see, there's a reason why I don't do that though. So what I've learned about, but now I'm being sincere here. The reason why I started off doing that, everything seems very canned.
Yeah.
And it's not authentic. You have no flow of conversation. You're like, oh yeah, check. Mm-hmm. Okay, sure. Sounds great. So I like to be, a little bit more original than that. So it's okay if you don't have an answer now. But I have an answer. It's nothing earth-shattering. So my son is not really into collecting, and I only have one. But he's got into collecting in a different way than I thought. He likes a show called One Piece. And, it's an anime show. It's very popular, more internationally than it is in the U.S., but it started to become pretty popular here. Anyway, there's cards, and he's learning about the game. Late last year, it was like I get the goosebumps again. There's a twinkle in my eye. He goes, I think I want to grade some of my cards. And I'm like, oh, yes, Ezra, we got a chance. We have a blossoming collector in our hands. So we just got them back. And really, that was my favorite hobby moment of 2024.
I love it. Well, I mean, I had a similar moment without going into too many details, but my father and I guess kind of in the vein of fractional ownership, my father and I bought a card together probably about 2 years ago. And it was really fun to hold together. And then we got a really good offer to sell the card. And he and I went back and forth for many months. Should we sell it? Should we not sell it? And I really enjoyed just that banter and the back and forth and kind of understanding how my dad thinks about these items. And, I've seen him have some unbelievable material in the past, never really kind of delved deep into the psyche of, why he purchased certain items and why he decided to sell certain items when he did. So that experience for me, very similar to you, Leighton, with your son. I'm in this equation, I'm the son, and I get to work with my dad. And it was really fun for us to have that shared experience together. We ultimately did sell the item, but it really wasn't even about the selling part of it. It was really just the experience of, kind of talking through it with him when we made the initial purchase, to co-owning the item together for a long time, to turning down multiple offers over the last couple of years to ultimately deciding, to sell it. And just that experience and getting to understand, kind of what has made him so successful and so respected as a collector was a really fun journey for me.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. One of the last things I wanted to mention here, because this is from personal experience, with Mascot. So, when Just Collect, my company, started working with Ezra, as Ezra mentioned at the beginning of our episode here today, it was very new. I was apprehensive, but I really liked the holistic, messaging that you were trying to get across. And ultimately, it has tremendously helped our business. But one of the features that I thought was really cool, maybe not necessarily more valuable, but just the way you talked about card shows and having just such great reverence for it, because I feel the same. I mean, I'm a card show kid also, is that when you brought the ability, and it takes work, but everything else in life that's worth it takes work. If you can upload your show inventory, even just some highlights before you go to a convention that Mascot's affiliated with, and you load it up in there. I mean, we've not only sold cards that we wouldn't have sold at the convention anyway, but what's happening is we're meeting new clients. And that is worth a lot more than just a one-off sale of a card to someone. And so, Ezra, keep up the great work with Mascot. I appreciate you being a friend of mine, and I'm looking forward to seeing you hopefully very soon at either the Philly show or the White Plains show in January.
I'm sure I'll see you at a slew of shows this year. And I do want to say something about you, Leighton, because we've worked together in different capacities, since essentially I came in this industry. And I remember when we were putting together the Mint Collective panels. So for context, we put together a show which ultimately has been rolled into Fanatics Fest, but it was sort of the first of its kind show where we had a lot of expert panels and speakers, really with the idea of just kind of educating the industry or people who want to come into the industry. And really just kind of putting people in front of them who could speak eloquently and articulately and honestly about the industry. And I said to my partner, David Marino, if there's one guy who I really want to speak on this panel, it's Leighton Sheldon. And I said that because I remember hearing you on a podcast. I think it was with Darren Rovell I think it was one of his eBay lives. And as someone who certainly know about the vintage baseball market, certainly, but when I heard you talk about the industry and talk about the trends and what to look for and what not to look for, it really struck a chord with me that you have a way of explaining things in such an eloquent and simplified manner, where someone who's pretty new to the space can grasp it and get it and feel comfortable kind of collecting and then doing after listening to you speak. So huge kudos to you. I appreciate all the nice comments about me and Mascot, but I also want to give you your flowers as well, because you're someone who has been doing it for a hell of a lot longer than I, and you're such a respected figure in this industry because you have such a great way of distilling information and being a really good so trusted voice in the hobby for good. So huge kudos to you as well.
Well, I appreciate that very much, Ezra, and of course you joining us today. If someone wants to reach out and they don't necessarily know if Mascot's for them, but they have a nice collection or they're a dealer and they're a little bit overwhelmed, Ezra, tell our audience here at Trading Card Therapy what's their next step to get in touch with you or someone from your team at Mascot.
Yeah, no, you can find us at withmascot.com is our website, so you can sign up, have a free account. And play around. We're always available. We have a great customer support team. If you reach out to us, support@withmascot.com. We're happy to either come to you in person or we can jump on a Zoom or Google Meets. We also have a lot of resources on our YouTube channel. There's a lot of demos and a lot of explainer videos. And so if you go to our YouTube channel @withmascot on YouTube, you can at least get a feel for what the platform can do. You can also follow us, or you can contact us on all social media channels @withmascot. So there's plenty of ways to find us, and we're always happy to chat with new people. Certainly.
Happy and healthy New Year to you and your family, Ezra. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, sir. Happy and healthy to you, and of course, happy and healthy to your audience as well.
Thanks so much. All right, gang. So that was Ezra Levine of Mascot. It is a tremendous tool. It is only helping to better the hobby at large. It doesn't matter if you are a collector, a dealer, an investor. There's a lot of great tools within the umbrella that they call Mascot. And I believe, as Ezra touched upon some of them today, there's a lot of great things coming down the pipeline. Thank you so much for tuning in to our 85th episode of Trading Card Therapy. I'm your host, Leighton Sheldon, the doctor, signing off. We'll see you soon.